Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast, your favorite college basketball podcast in all the land. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of UM Hoops. It is the first week of practice in the 2019-20 college basketball season. I have goosebumps. Dylan, how are you doing over there? I mean, you look like you are just through the roof, straight to the moon.
Ready to go. I mean, it's been a long off season. We're almost getting here finally. Should be good. Do we want to take a step back and talk about that Eagles-Lions game first?
We don't. We're good on that.
We don't.
We're going to just move right on forward to basketball. This is a basketball podcast.
Okay, probably for the best. Football doesn't exist.
I'm just saying though, the Eagles are going to beat some ass tonight against the Packers. They're coming back strong.
They really look like a team that was just ready to come on strong.
Convincing myself of these things. Not sure it's going to happen, but it was nice to give the Lions a moment to feel like an actual football franchise. I thought it was cute, and I hope everyone really enjoyed it out here.
The Lions are here to give moments to other people, so they'll come eventually. We all know that.
But seriously though, man, are you excited and can you believe it's the first week of the season?
I don't know about first week
so
of the
early.
season. It's
so
still
early.
practice. We're talking about practice here. It's not like it's the actual season. We're not.
But there's basketball being played. This is it. This is the build-up.
It's almost too close.
Big Ten Media Days next week.
It's like all this stuff. It's just get us to the real season. It's too close now. Like it's easy to just be like, all right, basketball's a long way away when it's June, July, whatever. Now it's almost here, but it's still not here. So this is a long month. I feel.
My God, what nationality is Burkhart? That name?
German.
Does it translate to wet blanket or something?
All right, so you're excited about practice. So tell us about practice. What should we be so excited about over here?
It's great. It's the dawn of a new season, the changing colors, all this stuff. It's
a new era.
It's the good stuff. New era in Michigan, number 1 ranked team in the country in East Lansing. What else do you want?
I want it to be November.
You're over here talking Lions.
I want it to be November.
Oh my gosh. All right, well, before we're just gonna roll through some thoughts that we have on both Michigan and Michigan State. This is a combined episode just to kind of talk about each program going into the first week of practice, some questions we have, some things that we've maybe seen from both early on here. But before that, I want to remind everyone to make sure that you subscribe to UM Hoops. Make sure you subscribe to The Athletic. If you support and appreciate this podcast, that's the way to help this thing stay steady. We have a whole year ahead of us, so lots of content coming on both sites. What do you have up there right now, Dylan, that you want to tell the people about?
Today we threw up a quick post about kind of Big Ten preseason expectations, aggregated all the different rankings from all the different magazines, and kind of came up with tiers of where teams rank and seeing how that plays out. Michigan State, obviously, the consensus number 1 team in the Big Ten. From there, you kind of go to a second tier of teams, which has Purdue, Maryland, and Ohio State. They're basically 2, 3, or 4 in most about every magazine. Michigan is more around the 6 range. There's 3 teams, I think, that are kind of right between 6 and 7, which would be Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin.
Sure.
So that's kind of how the league breaks down, and you can kind of see how that plays out. We got, I think, 6 different preseason rankings, and you can see who is the craziest ranges, who has the most consensus picks, obviously. Shout out to Michigan State and Northwestern for holding strong with those consensus rankings.
Well, next week will be the official, unofficial preseason poll will come out, put together by yours truly and Adam Jardy of the Columbus Dispatch. We do it every year. So next week when we record, we will both reveal our own preseason rankings.
I sent my ballot in already, ready to go.
And argue that out, and we'll talk about the official rankings of, or I guess preseason teams and things like that come from what Adam and I compile. And on The Athletic, first of all, if you're into podcasts, I have a second podcast with the great Nick Baumgartner. We are back at it, recording pods, and this week I think will be especially of interest to our listeners here. Nick and I sat down with New Michigan assistant coach Phil Martelli yesterday in the basketball office over at U of M and had a very wide-ranging, interesting conversation. We talked a little bit about this week's practices and this year's team, but it was way more about kind of introducing a guy who has a very interesting story to the Michigan fan base. So I've known Phil for a long time. We really enjoyed kind of catching up, and Nick was in there just laughing his ass off for most of the time. So it is a good listen, but you only get half of it if you're not a subscriber to The Athletic. So if you subscribe to The Athletic, you get the full episode, and there's some good stuff on the back end, especially Phil telling his tales of being a bar owner in Philadelphia back in the day, and you can imagine where that goes. So check that out on The Athletic, and subscribe to both. Again, rate this podcast, leave a review if you like it, and that's it. Let's get to the good stuff.
Where should we start?
I don't know. We'll start with the number one team in the country.
It's a good
how
place.
About that? Michigan State did open up its first practice of the year, and Tom Izzo held a lengthy, about probably half-hour press conference to start the year. Michigan went the other way with it. There's not been a peep out of Chrysler other than a state-sanctioned release of a video from the first practice. With
Is 30 minutes long for an Izzo press conference? I don't know if that really qualifies as lengthy. That seems short.
I mean, it's lengthy by press conference standards, but it was certainly better than 2 minutes from MGO Blue TV or whatever the hell Michigan did. So access is always preferred. It was nice to be able to get inside over at Michigan State. So.
And what's your number one takeaway from an afternoon up there in East Lansing? Is there anything you can learn from kind of an Izzo press conference on day one? Do you get like a read for where he sits on the season, or?
I mean, there's always going to be when you're in a position like Michigan State is right now, there's always going to be the questions about, how do you guys handle the expectations, and what does it mean to be number one, and what does it mean to be coming off of the Final Four last year, all these narrative things that you so love and enjoy and really gravitate toward.
If you can't gravitate toward a narrative on the first day of practice, when are you going to buy into a narrative?
True. So, in terms of what Izzo said about all that, it was very much accepting of, this team is really good. Is it the 2009 North Carolina team coming back? Like, no. But there are three major pieces coming back from last year's Final Four team, including the potential National Player of the Year this season. Good auxiliary pieces, good new pieces. A guy like Josh Langford coming back adds a different element. So he was kind of accepting of it. Like, we are the number one ranked team in the country, and we're not going to hide from it. Blah blah blah. The guys that want to put it out there like we are not paying attention, we don't notice it. It's just like I've never understood that. Like how can anyone honestly believe that? So he accepted that. And in terms of any newsworthy stuff, the two newsworthy items is that Joshua Langford has been practicing pretty much full run for a couple weeks now, and I watched him in practice, and there were a couple things that he did not do, but it was clearly a guy who's basically practicing like any other normal player. They're certainly taking things a little bit slowly. You don't need him in rebounding drills and things like that, where guys are kind of throwing their bodies into each other.
No war drill for Josh Langford on day one.
That would not be a good call. But looks good. Looks like he's getting his feet under him. And the other piece of information that was new and interesting was Izzo saying that Michigan State did file a petition in Joey Hauser's name to see if he could potentially gain eligibility this year. Something that would dramatically change the roster from day one. I think he'd be your day one starter at the 4 if he were to gain eligibility. And he's been practicing all along. Now he's been running mainly with the scout team, obviously, in like a red jersey and all that. But that waiver came through, he'd be flipping that thing around and running with the ones, I think.
Yeah, this waiver thing, it seems like something that everyone just kind of says under their breath every
Yep.
just like as a footnote, but people keep saying it, and is that going to happen? Like, is there a real chance of that, do you think?
Well, I think the longer that they wait for an answer, and this is the feeling that some people have over there, the longer that no one says no, the greater that there is a possibility of it happening, right? Because if it were a one-off, they read it and say, this is bullshit, and just send it back, that would have happened already. If it's something that is actually being looked into and given some weight, and now, what is claimed in that waiver, what the rationale that is being given
is the rationale?
Has not been made public. I've been told things, but it's, there's stuff that's, when you are told things off the record, it's off the record. So whether that comes out, if the waiver goes through, they're going to have to say why. So that would be an interesting
Is that
situation.
true, though? I don't know if that's really...
Well,
who would have to say
you
why?
You could say no. I think it'd be a little bit ridiculous to, put it this way. Tom Izzo has been vocal as any coach in the country, against this era of the transfers, and especially guys getting instant eligibility, because all it does is create more transfers. So, if you're going to be a guy who's outspoken against it, and then you are able to utilize that same rule, okay, how can you do that without any transparency? You can
be vocal against the rule, but you still have to play by the rule when it exists. You can still use the rule to your advantage to try to make the Final Four and win a national championship.
I'm not saying that they shouldn't file the waiver. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if the waiver goes through, you got to give some kind of explanation. No, they would be ridiculous not to. It wouldn't be fair to Joey Hauser.
Do we know what kind of waiver it is? Is it a hardship waiver? Is it a... Because there's all... I don't know the specifics.
There's only a hardship waiver.
There's different types of it, I believe, right?
Yeah. There's stuff that you'd be having reason to move home. There's stuff where you can claim that, you needed to leave the last place. Mm-hmm. There are reasons for... you can get instant eligibility if there's coaching changes. There's a number of things. I don't know what the exact terminology is, if they all actually fall under the umbrella of being a hardship. But he ain't a graduate, so he ain't a graduate transfer. So there's got to be something, right?
Do we know if is his brother also filing for a waiver?
I don't think Sam filed for a waiver. No. I don't know that for 110%, but if I remember correctly, last I talked to people connected here, I don't think that was a part of the plan. I think part of the plan was for him to go to Virginia and sit out a year to develop his game a little bit and kind of be in this system. So,
well, that would really be a game changer. Not that they need a game changer, but a game changer for Michigan State in the sense that you're getting a ready-made shooter at the 4 to really fill one of the biggest question marks, I guess, in the lineup, right?
Right, because he's not just like a pick and pop guy in the sense of what Kenny Goins was in the last 2 months of last year. His ability to pass is at an extremely high level. So the stuff that you could do with him, passing out of the high post and even passing off the block, if you want to run, in and out stuff, he has a great feel for the game. He really sees the floor well. He's got great hands. They would give them it would just give them another option to not only shoot, but to facilitate for others. That, we've talked about how effective Josh Langford could be if he's used as more of a spot-up shooter. Well, if you suddenly have a guy like Hauser and Winston out there with Langford, right, but I think it would create so many more scenarios of the ball being able to get to him in those types of situations.
And think about how nice it would be for him to be able to play with a great point guard who also passes.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Big upgrade.
What a world. What a world for a guy who
Might be a tough adjustment. The ball actually comes to me?
He had those palms out a lot last year. Just empty, though. Just begging for it. But, is this me saying I think it's going to happen? No, I still think in all likelihood it does not happen. But it can't just be glossed over that this is something that's in play right now. I thought it was kind of confusing that he said it and it kind of just came and went on that day. Like it wasn't a particularly big deal.
It just seems like a footnote always.
Oh, and part of it was Izzo like basically poo-pooing it immediately. He said, "Yeah, we know we filed a waiver because that's what you have to do in college basketball in 2019," which is true. But he made it seem like there was no chance in hell, and I'm like, dude, as long as there's any paperwork being filed in Indianapolis, I don't think there's ever a non-starter of an issue. Like you have no idea how they're going to interpret things, what they're going to find, what additional documentation they're looking at. It could be a number of things.
The flow chart graphic on Twitter?
No.
About the waivers?
I've not.
Look it up. It's kind of funny. Basically, like, are you transferring to a big school? Do you have a lawyer? All these things. Pretty funny graphic if you look it up and find it. But that's the thing. Like, if you have a lawyer, if you have this, like, anything can happen in these cases,
right.
I would say, right?
Right.
So that should be interesting to watch play out. What else did you kind of take from... I know you got to watch practice a little bit up at Michigan State.
Sure.
Anything surprise you? Anything look different about this team from the team that you followed all the way to the Final Four last year?
Well, I mean, I think you're always going to just kind of be looking at, especially the newcomers and things like that. Physically, guys look great. Aaron Henry looks like he has a pro body, ready to go. Xavier Tillman is probably a little more slender than people might remember. He's definitely kind of carved himself out, and he looks phenomenal. Get my notes here. Rocket Watts is a dude who will be just fascinating to watch. I feel like every time he steps on the court, his speed. I mean, the guy's name is Rocket, but his speed is even better, I feel like, than has been advertised. His first step is off the charts. He gets down the floor. Michigan State likes to run the ball, right, when they have the bodies to do it. This guy is a blur going down the court. I think he's going to be electric. He's not quite as... loose with shots as I thought because of the film that you would see at Aspire. He seemed like just a pretty much a gun, but he's down with moving the ball. Now I think his game needs to be refined a lot. He does a lot of things that would make any coach just kind of rip a little bit of their hair out of their head.
I'm sure that didn't happen at all when he made those mistakes in practice.
It wasn't too bad. It was not too bad, but. Stuff like he'll catch the ball with one hand and take a jumper on the move for no reason when you could set your feet, right? There's just things like that they're going to have to kind of just chip away at. But like, I feel like he might be like a must-see kind of guy. When he gets out there, you're going to probably scoot up in your seat a little bit. So Gabe Brown is clearly stronger. He is shooting the shit out of the ball right now to the point where, if Langford, something goes kind of haywire there and, you're not ready to play Rocket 35 minutes a game, something like that, I don't think it's crazy to think Gabe Brown could see some time at the 2. Because he needs to get on the floor somehow. And it's not easy unless he's ready to play some more 4, but then it's kind of, you get into a defensive questions of, kind of what could he do if you're playing against a true big man? Like, could you maybe put Aaron Henry guarding the opposing 4 and let Gabe switch to a wing or something like that? But, like, I don't know.
Why wouldn't he be why is it weird to play him at the 2 in your mind? He basically just shoots threes. That's exactly what McQuaid did on offense.
Yeah, I guess it's because he's so tall. First of all, it's just weird seeing a 6'8" gangly 2-man. I get your point, but Yeah, I don't know. I just think of him as a 3-4, But you're right. I think he probably projects in the end to a 2 because that's what his skill set is. Not his fault.
Yeah, I mean, his role is going to be like he doesn't do a lot with the ball. He's going to be on the floor to stretch the offense, right? So, I mean, it makes sense to play him at the 2. And if you're worried about defensively, Henry's going to guard the better wing regardless, I would think, right? So, I don't know. Should be something to watch. Can we go back to Rocket for a second? I have a question. Where do you think, what do you think is the best role for him? Is it sort of like a microwave offense off the bench? Is it is that going to be his role? Do you see him being more of a bigger piece? I'm just curious how you see him fitting in this year because that's just so hard to project with freshmen. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, I think it will be a situation where he can come because he's not just an offensive player. That's the thing. They are looking at him as a potentially elite perimeter defender as a college player. Probably sooner rather than later. He is faster than everyone on the court. He's super athletic. He's strong. He's not built like a, little frail freshman coming in. I feel like you're putting him in the game. You're not just sacrificing defense just because he's going to run up and down and chuck threes. He's not that player. I think eventually he could be a point guard at Michigan State. A
backup point guard, starting shooting guard, or backup for both spots?
Backup for both spots would be my guess. And what that means for Foster Loyer, I don't know. But it'll be pretty hard if Josh Langford's playing 28 minutes a game and you're wanting to give maybe a Gabe Brown a couple minutes at the 2, things like that, you're going to want to play Rocket. And whether that ends up being, 8 minutes at one guard spot, 8 minutes at the other, 16 minutes sounds pretty good. It might be a little bit much. I would guess he's closer to 12, something like that, on average. But, yeah, I think he needs to see time at both because he gives you something different at each spot, and I think there's potentially a lot of positives in each. And then there could be a situation where if you're getting chewed up by an opposing guard because Cassius isn't cutting it defensively, Rocket could be an answer for a stretch if you need some stops. If they need stops more than they need scores, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What's the biggest? The other thing is it takes more than just athletic ability to be good on defense as a freshman, right? So you have to see how he kind of responds to a team setting. But what I guess, if he's the fastest guy on the team, electric in transition, and a great defender, what's the biggest question mark for him as far as adjusting to the? You think it's kind of eliminating those high school moves from his game?
I don't think he's
stuff.
I don't think he's been particularly coached up, and I think there's a lot of. He's one of those guys. He will also drive so insane in some of the stuff he's going to do on the court because he's a freshman and he does play 100 miles an hour, and it's hard to play, as fast as that kid can without making some mistakes. And when you make a mistake, you get pulled. That's just what happens. So. Those will be the things that kind of keep him, when he does get pulled. I imagine that'll be why. In terms of his skills, he could probably improve his ball handling. He's going to need to be able to run. If they're going to play him any minutes at the 1, he needs to be able to run the offense. He needs to know what you're doing. Be able to identify things on both sides of the court like that. Where he is on that, I have no idea. You can't tell that on one practice. You won't be able to tell that probably in the Kentucky game. It'll take a little bit to kind of have a real feel for how D1 big boy basketball ready he is from the cerebral standpoint.
He'll also be a lot more D1 big boy basketball ready in February and March than November and December, right?
No doubt.
I feel like he's kind of a classic break him down to build him up situation for Izzo, where you're not going to need him to play those big minutes early, but you can give him enough and build him up to the point that maybe you would need him late in the season.
Yeah, I think he has an extremely high season or a high ceiling for this year.
Could that mean starting at some point? How high?
As long as Josh Langford's healthy and as long as Cassius Winston is breathing, I don't know if he starts.
What if? I mean, you couldn't see a shift where you move Henry to the 4 and go small.
Play Langford at the 3. Play Langford and Rocket
Just
on the
3
wings.
guards.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Especially if the 4 is, say Malik Hall just proves to not be ready. Say, Thomas Kithier is more needed in backup minutes at the 5 and isn't able to give you 20, 25 at the 4, stuff like that. And it is the prevailing question is the minutes at the 4. And if all of the answers turn out to not be great, maybe that's a scenario. Sure.
Or if Watts is too good. I would say that's probably a closing lineup, not a starting lineup, where Kithier would probably still start, for example, and maybe you play that lineup heavy minutes if you like it. And
like anyone who watches Michigan State knows, you will see 1,000 different lineups in any given day, especially early. Up until mid, first week of February, you'll see every possibility known to mankind. They can play 10 deep, so. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Malik Hall is, I still think, very much in the conversation to be the starting 4. It could be Thomas Kithier on day 1 because it's versus Kentucky at Madison Square Garden. That's a big freaking situation to throw a freshman into. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Malik Hall does kind of play his way into that spot. Everyone's still raving about him. He's super athletic. He can finish in transition. He can do some pick and pop stuff. He can shoot the ball. His biggest question is definitely his ball handling, in my opinion. But how much do they really ask from that spot to put the ball on the floor? Doesn't really happen.
You think you could count Kenny Goins' dribbles last year on 2 hands? Potentially.
So
worked out all right.
Yeah. But I really like him a lot. It was really good to kind of finally see him play some real basketball in person. Looks every bit of like 6'7". He's not especially tall, but he's got enough size to be in that spot. And he's a very interesting prospect.
I feel like the biggest question there is probably how well he shoots it when the lights are on in a college game, right? Because I think you do need to get shooting from the 4 spot if you're Michigan State, with just based on how they played late last year with Winston. Like, that really just opens up the whole floor. Mm-hmm. So if you're not getting that, I don't think that would say he doesn't play, but it might kind of lower his ceiling on the year, right?
You're right. And like the pick and pop stuff that they were able to do, and the looks that when you have a guy like Cassius Winston, the looks that you can get on those, they're there. It's there all day, right? And it's just whether you have someone that you can put in that spot to make those shots. Because I know Xavier Tillman made some threes last year, and everyone got very excited about it. But at the end of the day, when you look at his numbers, when he tried to be a 3-point shooter, it did not go well. That is not where he's buttering his bread until he proves it. So I don't think you can suddenly say they can go 1-5 pick and pop and Xavier Tillman's going to be hitting 2 threes a game. I just don't see that happening until I actually see it.
And it was never 1-5 pick and pop that they were getting threes off of. It was that roll replace action where the 5 rolls and the 4 pops, right? That's very different. It's different than like Michigan under Mo Wagner when he's just popping every time on the actual ball screen. Actually became a really difficult, like that was the hardest thing for every team to guard when they were playing Michigan State, because it just puts pressure on so many more plays on your defense when you run that action. And it never did before because Goins never made threes, and then all of a sudden he did, and it completely changed the offense. So that's the thing. Like, if you're a 30% shooter, they're going to give you that shot, or a 28% shooter. If you're 40%, all of a sudden you're pulling your hair out and flying around on defense trying to figure out how to stop that instead of the other thing. And Xavier Tillman's getting layup after layup after layup.
The other big buy-in on Hall is that whatever teams are putting on him on the other side of the floor, they are comfortable that he is athletic enough, smart enough, and comfortable guarding multiple positions that you can switch. So if you have him at the 4 and Tillman at the 5, you can switch 1 through 5.
And Henry at the. I mean, come on, that's an
right.
unfair switching lineup. Then
exactly.
Any of those guys could guard centers or point guards.
Right. So I mean, that's just an ideal situation. And they like Hall's upside there as a guy who can guard multiple spots and at least hold his own.
A year and a half ago, we were talking all the time about how Michigan State would never switch on ball screens, and now they have one of the probably most switchable defenses in college basketball, if you think about it. Really,
evolved
that comes
to their credit.
What?
I said it evolved to their credit. Yeah.
Well, also, I think just Nick Ward to Xavier Tillman sort of changes your possibilities a bit.
Circumstances allowed things, for no doubt.
Let's talk about Tillman for a second, because he got, I think, 2 or 3. I have this roundup of all Big Ten first team. A couple people had Xavier Tillman in the first team. What does an all Big Ten first team season look like for Xavier Tillman? Where does his game grow? Because to me, he's really the perfect complementary player. Mm-hmm. He's a guy anyone will put in their team, but I don't know. Like, can he put up numbers to have that kind of season?
Well, put it this way. I certainly think his rebounding can improve. I think he could be. Do you think of him as a dominant rebounder?
Good. I don't know. He's not the same kind of offensive rebounder that Michigan State has had, I feel like, but his numbers are all very good on the rebounding side of things. So I don't know. I don't think an improved rebounding effort is going to transform his game. I mean,
so he was at 7 a game last year. I think he's a guy who could average 10 boards a game.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably came close to that in the last month of the season, right? I mean, 7 a game, he was playing limited minutes for the first 4 months of the year. Right? Not limited, but shared.
He could certainly, without a doubt, become a better offensive rebounder. And if he does, that will obviously lead to more scoring, right? He should be a second chance bucket machine.
He had the best offensive rebounding rate on the team last year. 67th nationally.
I had him at 12.9 last year. It actually dropped from his freshman year.
Yeah, 12.9 is 67th in the country, which is pretty good.
Okay.
So it's not like he wasn't getting those buckets.
I think he could be a dominant offensive rebounder. So I just don't think of him as I didn't think of him last year as a dominant offensive rebounder. And let's see. So against Texas Tech, he had 3 offensive boards. Duke, he had 6. That's obviously really good. 3 against LSU, 3 against Minnesota, 2 against Bradley. Yeah. But so put it this way, though. I think his rebounding numbers could go up. I think skill-wise, he's going to be a better player this year. I think his hands have gotten softer. He can finish with his left hand way more. He had this little play where he kind of curled and caught a ball on the move at the foul line, took 2 dribbles, and went into this beautiful soft layup with his left hand where you say, well, okay, that's a pro play. That's what a pro big man looks like. If he's doing that stuff this year, he'll be the best or second best big man in the conference, right? The conversation is going to be Xavier, Jalen Smith, John Teskey. Am I missing anyone there?
I mean, not in my mind, but some people would say Caleb Wesson. I'm not a believer.
No. So I'm not missing anyone. All right.
I'm curious if he goes from right now. I would say on offense, he's essentially a finisher. Can he become a scorer too? And does Michigan State want him to become a scorer? Is he going to ever create his own offense? Are you going to run stuff through him like you did for Nick Ward? And to what extent? That's my question, I think.
Back to the basket or with his face to the basket?
Either. I mean, really, I don't think he needs to for Michigan State to be great, but if he's going to kind of grow into this player that I think a lot of people think is possible, I think he has to add that just based on how big he is, what he does. If he's going to be a pro at 6'8", he's going to have to have some of that or have something.
Well, I feel like if you can go 8 for 12 from the field against Duke in the Elite Eight, then he scored 19 points in that game. That's the up. I mean, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. So trying to think of the right way to put this. So he's basically an extension of Cassius Winston with how they ran their offense last year. You agree with that?
I think everyone on that team is an extension of Cassius Winston. The guy has the ball in his hands 80% of the time.
So does that go? Is there any reason that number would change where someone else is doing something, right? Like it could. We've talked about like Langford took more shots and they weren't all created from Winston. Do you look for someone else to grow in that role, or are you going to say, all right, Cassius, you need to carry the entire offense. We're going to dribble the clock out, give you 5 ball screens, and then you're going to come up with the miraculous pass to find Xavier Tillman roll into the basket.
Now, could that be what they default to in the last 10 to 5 minutes of every game? Yeah, of course. But is that what they are trying to? Is that what they're going into the season saying this is what we'll be? No. Like,
so
they want a guy like Aaron Henry to be able to play out of a ball screen?
So where does playing through Xavier Tillman rank in terms of guys you want to play through? That's my question. Winston's number 1.
I'd say he's second or third.
Okay. So you think it's Henry and Tillman?
Yeah.
That's my question. And I think he can grow in transition. I think he can grow.
Yeah, as a rim runner, for sure.
As a rim runner, as a seal guy. And that was free money that Nick Ward just picked up off the ground every single game.
Yeah.
And Tillman doesn't do that to that extent right now.
But he's getting up. He gets up and down the floor better. Is he Nick Ward right now? No, but Nick Ward was literally probably the best rim runner in the country for 2 or 3 years. Tillman has he moves differently, but he busts his ass to get down there every single time. He's just a different player. But he is, like I said, he's more slender, and he's getting up and down. You know, he was better from his sophomore year to his freshman year. He'll be better from his junior year than he was as a sophomore.
I'm not saying he's not going to be better. I'm just curious in what areas.
No, I meant like running. I meant like getting up and down the court. Specifically, is what I'm talking about.
Because he shot 65% on twos last year, which is great. 55th in the country. That also tells me that most of your twos are catch and dunk, catch and finish around the basket.
Sure.
And that, obviously, like Nick Ward could have had those same opportunities. He was down at 58% because a lot of things he's doing is trying to create his own shot, which you're going to miss more. So I'm curious if that number drops a little. Like, it wouldn't be bad if he takes more shots and his 2-point percentage drops to what? High 50s. You know what I mean?
Right.
But let's look at it this way.
I think looking at the entirety of last year is kind of a folly because it was a story of 2 seasons. So if you look at his last 13 games last year, this is when he kind of really emerged into the guy who we're talking about now. He played 30 minutes a game. He started all 13 games. He shot 59% on twos, which is probably more realistic when you're talking about this year. Averaged 8.1 boards a game, 2.8 offensive, and scored 13.3 points per game with 2 blocks. Like, I think that's the guy you see with maybe 3 or 4 more points. So a 15-point, 8 or 9 rebound guy playing 30 minutes a game.
Yeah, that's what the thing is there's not really a lot of depth inside, which means he's going to get minutes. A lot of times you've seen these Michigan State teams that have so many bigs that no one plays that many minutes, but if they play at the tempo you're talking about and he's getting 75% of minutes, you're going to look at him as a guy who's averaging a double-double potentially.
So for the sake of comparison, the first 26 games of last year, he averaged 8 and 7 in 21 minutes a game. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a fascinating guy to watch, and his upside in terms of what he is this year, I think, is pretty much as high as anyone in the conference, not named Cassius.
Yeah, I'm curious if he emerges nationally as like a guy who draft scouts like, which hasn't really happened at this point.
Well, I mean, people were very well aware of him coming down the stretch last year.
Aware of him, but it's not like he's showing up on mock drafts. It's not like he's a guy. But, like, if you look at how he plays and what he does, like, he's a guy that you look at him and you say, if I had a first-round pick and I had to take someone from the Big Ten, I might look at him before Jalen Smith.
Sure.
Like, obviously there's potential there, but Tillman's defense, his feel for the game is all next-level stuff.
That's the thing, and because we've had this entire conversation, we haven't mentioned the fact that he's probably the best switching 5-man in college basketball. And there's going to be times you see him at the 4 this year. You're going to see him play alongside other bigs. Like, if they're going to try to see what Marcus Bingham can give him, expecting you might see Xavier Tillman in there, because why go bing him with another guy who's kind of unproven? You stick him in there with Tillman, right? Now you have yourself kind of a safety net. I think you'll see Tillman and Kithier play together.
Yeah, I would think
they're gonna try to put him on that court as often as possible, because not only is he an elite defender, but he's an elite defender who avoids fouls.
New era.
How about
RP Nick Ward avoiding fouls. Let's get into
we're
Michigan
40
a little
minutes.
bit.
We're 40 minutes into
We've
this
just been
freaking
talking about Michigan State. Let's talk a little Michigan. We did not get to see practice like you did in East Lansing, but you did talk to Phil Martelli yesterday. You want to start there, and we can
like I said,
where it takes us?
We kind of got into what's actually going on behind closed doors. Obviously, he was not, Phil wasn't ready to kind of open up the vault and say, this is this, and this is the lineups we're looking at. It didn't quite get to that, but we did ask, what does this look like right now? And, the best thing that he would go with is, you have to think about what the Miami Heat look like if you want to know what Michigan basketball looks like right now. So there you go. They're running what the Heat runs. That's pretty much it right now. And they're going to play man-to-man defense. Their number one goal over there right now is to be the best defensive team in the country. In their first day of practice, they only ran defense. They didn't do a minute of offensive work. And the second day, the plan on the agenda was to play 100% of the time on defense.
So
that's all I know so far.
I'm going to go ahead and venture a guess that there was never a John Beilein practice that did not feature at least 25 minutes of shooting drills. So that's a change.
That is a change, yes.
Not to say that defense wasn't a priority when they were top 5 in defense the last 2 years, but that is definitely a difference. I'm really curious about when you say that, like, they're going to be what the Miami Heat is on defense and what that means as far as transition. Like, the NBA is a very different game from college. Like, you don't run pack line defense in the NBA. Right. So what, like, you can say man-to-man. That's a really general term.
Right.
I'm just really curious to see. We've talked so much about the offense. What's the offense going to look like?
I was interpreting when he said the Miami Heat, like, both sides of the floor. I think it's offensively, too.
Yeah, that's we can get there. I'm just talk about we yell about what's the offense going to look like the whole summer, and everyone's like, oh, what are they going to run? But defense is almost more different in college than the NBA.
I don't disagree. I do not disagree, and I also don't have the answer. Like, I have no idea what it would look like at the college level.
Like, and I just think that's something that kind of goes overlooked, is that all the, like, concepts and schemes are very different, and people do things in college defense that you would not even think about doing in the NBA. Right? Like, in the NBA, every player can hit a 19-foot shot off the dribble.
Right.
You have to guard things entirely differently. And you're going from a regime that was really built based on only what they knew from college, right? Where, like, the NBA is like, oh, well, like, we'll watch that in June and pick up a few tips and run this baseline out of bounds play. Whereas now it's sort of the opposite, where what is Juwan Howard going to think? Like, it's just like a whole different way to think about defense and scheme, and I'm just really curious to see what that ends up looking like early in the season, almost as much as the offense.
Sure.
Are you trying to take away threes? Are you trying to defend the rim? Are you know what I mean? There's just so many different things that could look like, and we don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like ball pressure. Like, I don't know.
That's not the NBA. I mean,
but, like, that's effective in college, so, I have no idea.
Yeah, I guess you can probably look at it and say it starts with ball screens, and ball screen defense in the NBA is a huge thing, obviously, and I think there's a lot of trickle down as far as how people guard ball screens in the NBA into college. So that makes a lot of sense as a natural progression. It's just some of those higher level things where the rules are different and it's just a different game, and what that looks like as far as philosophy will be really fascinating.
Like, what do you think would be worst case scenario if they're trying to defend if they're trying to run NBA style defenses at the college level, what do you think would be the end result?
I'm more curious if it manifests itself as like a adjustability, like we're going to scheme our defense this way for this game, or if it's kind of a rigid, this is how we play defense approach. Because different teams do things differently. Like a lot of teams have kind of that core fundamental, this is how we play defense. But some of the more curious teams, I mean, you say 100% man-to-man, but you look at some teams that switch defenses and do different things are actually almost more effective sometimes to scheme against, right? And the way you put it, it doesn't really seem like you should expect Michigan to run out any sort of like college gimmick defense, like a kind of a junk matchup zone or like a three-quarter court press or anything like that.
I can't see that.
So you think 100% man-to-man?
That would be my guess. That's not. I was not told. No one has specifically said to me 100% man-to-man. That is my. I think that is how Juwan Howard wants Michigan to look.
Fair enough.
They're all about toughness and blah blah blah, and it's or no one's going to outwork, and these are just the things that are being said. Like, what does that look like? I have no. I don't know.
I think
Yeah, it's like
we'll
our conversation after the Creighton game will be one of the more interesting talks that we have on this podcast, right? Because it'll be actually seeing what. Because I don't think they're going to open up anything. I don't think we're going to see shit. It'll be the exhibition against I don't know, and the first game against App State. I think those are going to be the first times that we really see anything in terms of what this looks like.
And then that Creighton game is the next Tuesday, right?
Right.
And that's going to be that's like a real test. I mean, it's not a easy game by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, game over game, Michigan's kind of statistical profile looks similar, or do you think it'll be like just like roulette? Like, this game they crashed the glass. This game they turned it over all the time. This, you know what I mean? Like, if you lined up every four factors graph I ever did for John Beilein, they would look very similar. Right? Like, there would be a trend.
I would say, because of the roster, I'd be inclined to say that they're rather consistent, I think. Because it's not like there's this total question mark roster. Well, who the hell is going to play at point guard? Who's going to do this? Who's going to, other than who shoots a lot of times, threes, like basically who takes your 3-point shots is probably the number one statistical question that you and I might have offensively. Like what their number breakdowns look like there. But because it's still Simpson, Livers, Teskey, and then some guys that we're at least familiar with, I don't see it being big dramatic swings one way or another. But if it is, would I be surprised? No, of course not. I mean, it's a completely different program.
Yeah, it's not like it's one of those teams like I feel like Illinois last year. Every game, they're like different dude off the bench that scores 20 points, and you're like, where did he come from? And it's just you're playing with different guys. I feel like you're pretty set in your core trio, which will kind of keep some consistency. But I'm just like, are they going to run one day and play slow? Like, I don't know. I mean,
the tempo numbers will undoubtedly be different because
they'll be faster for sure.
Right. Yeah, but I could certainly see them being a team that goes and scores 85 points one night and goes and scores 62 4 days later. I think you're going to have that, but you even had that under John. Yeah,
you have that. I mean, shooting is infinitely variable. You can't really you're not going to shoot the lights out every game, and if you are, you're Villanova winning the national championship.
Right. But I don't think they're going to have a game where they get 15 offensive rebounds and then 4 days later they get 3. You know what I mean? Offensive rebound is going to be a perfect example of something that will be dramatically different. I think. I think they send a second guy on the offensive glass more than they ever did under John Beilein.
That would mean ever.
Right.
That would mean they do it.
So, there were long swaths of time where they said nobody. All 5 go back when a shot goes up. I think you're going to see, and they have the personnel to do it too. John Teskey should be able to offensive rebound. If you have Brandon Johns and Isaiah Livers on the floor at the same time together, those guys should be flying to the glass. it will look dramatically different in that regard.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just curious, is it we send 3 guys to the glass on Tuesday, and then, we're playing this team, we send 1, and how much it changed? I mean, obviously, like, you change your game plan, but just to what extent will be really fascinating, I think.
Like, the most interesting will be the 3 games in Atlantis, right? 3 games in 3 days to see what are the swings. Like, that'll be fascinating.
Yeah, I assume you're not, in your game as a head coach, you're not, like, throwing out the whole game plan and changing everything you do overnight, but we'll see.
You have no idea. The guy's never been a head coach. You have no idea how he's going to react.
That's very true. What else kind of stood out from your conversation with Martelli? Any other good nuggets?
Well, I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because this kind of feeds into what we were just talking about. The fact that, talking to Martelli, a guy who was at the same school for 34, 35 years, whatever, was a head coach for 25 years, never really knew Juwan Howard at all before being hired. This whole staff is operating with that level of unfamiliarity. Like, this is not just like, man, Phil Martelli and Juwan Howard don't really know each other. Nobody knows each other. The whole staff, all 4 main guys, no one has ever worked together. I can't think of a situation that has ever happened. Like, Juwan Howard and Howard Isley know each other from growing up and crossing paths in the NBA and stuff like that, but they've never worked side by side together. Sadie Washington hasn't worked with any of these guys. Same goes for Phil, obviously. Like, am I crazy, or is that something that is just kind of being completely glossed over, that these guys, you're not only trying to formulate what this thing's going to look like, everyone's trying to learn, like the right hand's constantly trying to learn what the left hand's doing, right?
Do you think that comes from the NBA a little bit, where staffs are more pieced together, not always by the head coach? It's sort of just like John Beilein's not choosing all of his assistant coaches in Cleveland, right? Like, so it's more of maybe more familiar with kind of working in those environments where a staff is kind of put together. It also goes back to one of the first things Juwan said, which was he wants to learn and he's open to new ideas. And if you can make that work, that's a very valuable thing to have all different sort of input.
Right.
But it also can be a lot of, like, it's a fine line between too much noise or too many yes men, right? Like, sort of the infinite question when you have a coaching staff. Like, I think some of John Beilein's early staffs probably had too many people who would just agree with him. Later on, he really brought in people who would challenge him or bring up different ideas, right?
Sure.
Kind of changed his viewpoint. I don't think he was looking for his assistant coaches to do that early in his tenure. But Howard has to balance taking all that information in, figuring out what's important, and then acting on it, right? Like, and keeping everyone happy, right? Everyone wants to feel like they have an input. That's the hardest thing. What happens when you lose a game? I think a coach worries that their staff won't really stick together in that sort of situation. Is someone mad that they could have done it this way, and that's what I suggested, right? Like, that's the balance that you have to find in that situation. And
I would say you have no idea how anyone is going to react under this circumstance, right? You can sit here and say, "Oh, these are all highly qualified, and this is going to work out just well." I have no idea, and it's impossible. And anyone who says they do is full of shit, because this thing could go any number of directions. Everyone in that building. I mean, heads are still kind of spinning over there of how everything has changed. It is completely different, and everything worked one way forever. And people who haven't been around Michigan or really understood what happens internally over there, like, John Beilein dictated every minute of every day, and everyone followed whatever he wanted at all times. Like, their schedules were whatever he wanted, in whatever order, and was followed to the minute. Now, everything's just kind of floating, I would say. It's just, and everyone has to adjust.
Well, now think about it. You have a situation where Juwan Howard's probably never really dictated a schedule for an entire program like that. Phil Martelli has for the last 3 decades. Sadie Washington worked under a staff that did that, and then Howard Isley has never been on the college staff at all. Like,
right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of crazy to think about how, a lot of pieces just need to find ways to fit together right now. Like, you're asking a lot for this thing to come together by November 5th. And, they are fortunate to have some key returning guys that it's not, total confusion out there or anything like that. You have guys who play a certain way and know what the job looks like, right, of what it means to show up every day and put the work in. So you have that. That's a luxury.
And I think they know how to communicate, right? Like, Xavier Simpson, we've talked about his leadership for 2 years, but he can kind of be that guy who can, like, be the guy who goes between the coaching staff, the team, right? Like, I feel like he would tell anyone if he disagreed with something on either side of that equation and kind of, for better or worse, hold that together, you would think.
Yeah. What do you think of his hair decisions this summer?
I think they're illegal. I don't think he can play with the beads.
Oh, really? You went into the rule book?
Someone told me that, and it's a safety hazard. But he did say in his little video that it was just for practice.
This little preseason move? Is he cutting it, or is he going just to the braids?
I'm not sure. He did
this
not.
This is the info we need.
That level of
Hoops.
detail in the 2-minute I'm Go Blue video. That's all I got to work with here. But he is going with the headband. He said, "Headband sticking
I like
around."
the headband. Like the headband. It's a good look.
I mean,
we'll get him in Chicago. So we can get the things that the questions that really matter.
That's the content everyone needs.
Absolutely. What else are you thinking about on Michigan right now? What are your concerns, questions, interest, curiosities?
I did a story about, I'm doing like a position by position sort of thing, kind of looking at the roster. Started with point guard, and I come back to this idea with Simpson that it's such a fine line of how to use him properly in an offense to get the most out of him because of how unique his skill set is. Right? Like, he has the most obvious strengths and the most obvious weaknesses, and you really have to. I don't know that you can use him as just another piece. You almost just have to build your whole offense around him.
Sure.
Do you agree with that?
I 100% agree.
That's a risk as far as like the transition. Like, Juwan Howard has to balance the idea of he wants to play this way, but he has to play the best way to use Zavier Simpson, because if you don't, I don't know what you're doing, right? So
right.
I'm just really fascinated by that kind of give and take.
And that's a thing where coaching experience is kind of paramount in knowing what your system is versus what your personnel is. And, Beeline, with 40 whatever years of head coaching experience, was as good, I think, as probably anyone in the country as coaching to his personnel's strengths.
I would say he was as good as recruiting to how he wants to play. I don't know that every year he arrived at a new job, they went like 13-18.
Every time he did what?
Every time he showed up at a new place, they went like 13-18. I mean, I don't think that if you look back at his first year at Michigan, it was asking a bunch of guys who were recruited to play a different way to play his way.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but like, I don't know how many other coaches could dial up wrinkles or whatever terminology you want to use in what they do within their system that could have gotten one more ounce out of a player like Xavier Simpson. Right.
I would say
Nick Stauskas in his sophomore year. Like, that's this type of stuff that I mean. I get what you're saying, but yeah. And for Juwan to kind of be in this situation where you would imagine he has envisioned himself as a head coach, right? So now you have to think about, what does my team look like when I'm a head coach, and what do I want to run, and what do I want our identities to be? You're walking into a system where your player who has probably the greatest single impact on winning and losing on any given night, who, like you said, has super specific skill set that if you're putting him in situations that don't fit what he does, he could be a detriment just as much as he could be an all-league player. And he is wildly unique in that way. But I don't know how Juwan kind of is going through that process of installing what he wants the program to be. Like, is it something where you see what you get, right? You go through all those summer workouts and you're seeing the team and then drawing, okay, this is what I have, so this is what we're going to run. Or is it, we're going to run this, I'm going to watch workouts and find out what's the best way to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the fact that he hasn't been a head coach for decades and doesn't have this like system or established way that he wants to play means that he'd probably be flexible to making adjustments and just kind of learning as you go, right? Like you can say, I want to play this way in year 2, but we have this. It's not like he doesn't have a 2-guard offense with him, and he doesn't have videos and DVDs, and he's not like you're going to go do that, right? You're not Ed Cooley, you're not John Beilein, you're not one of those guys. Going back to Simpson, though, if you think about, I think that's probably one of the most masterful things Beilein did as far as adjusting to fit him in. If you think about where they were in Maui 2 years ago, and he was like, I don't know what, our point guard can't do what I want him to do. He was benching him. He was just completely lost. And he really rebuilt kind of his whole system in a way to make Zavier Simpson fit. And he really blossomed into this player that I don't know that anyone really thought he could be at that point. Mm-hmm. And those are all like small adjustments, right? They're small things, but
part of getting part of getting the most out of him is letting him be one of the most ball dominant players that you'll see out there, right? And like go back to remember the hubbub over the when Jordan Poole goes early, and I talked to Anthony Poole's father, and he had those quotes about how often Xavier had to have the ball in his hands and what it the impacts on other players by having a guy play the way Xavier did. Like everyone read that as shots at him, but Anthony Poole said repeatedly in that conversation, like, we get it. We understand why, because like that was the best path to winning. If Zavier Simpson's your point guard, it makes perfect sense to play that way. It doesn't need to be stating facts. Doesn't need to be stating cheap shots, right? It's like that can be true. What he said. Yeah. Should he have said it publicly? That's in the eye of the beholder. But agenda-driven facts that also skip the fact that Jordan really couldn't make an open shot for the last 3 months of the season. You get my. I'm not trying to rehash all this. I'm trying to just point out that, like, even internally and amongst the people around the program, like that is it's an understood thing of this brand of basketball comes with this point guard specifically.
That's a stat for you that kind of backs that up. Half-court assists last year, Zavier Simpson had more than Cassius Winston, who you think of as this.
Wow.
So, like, that is just how important Simpson was to everything Michigan did in the half-court. And that's what you have to find a balance with as far as implementing your system. If you're going to, like, and part of it isn't, like, Xavier's a great passer, but, yeah, he can't play off the ball unless he can start making open shots, or it just ruins kind of the rest of your offensive spacing. And how you decide to play off of that will really, I think there could be some growing pains early in the season trying to find that balance. The good thing is if you're going to play all defense for the first 2 days of practice, it's like throwing Zavier Simpson a bone. I'm sure he's all in with that.
Right. But like the thing is, like if you're going to try to play through Xavier as like a scoring point guard, like guy who's kind of ready to come into his own, like it could be risky. It could definitely be risky. And because one of the things that's most fascinating about a guy like Xavier is when he was at his best, Michigan was as good as anyone in the country at times. And when he played poorly, they struggled, like next level struggles. They would look like a completely different team. And I don't know, like the times that he would try to be the dude offensively, like there would be fits and bursts where you would say, "Oh, look at this," he's kind of getting it done, but then like it wouldn't be winning basketball.
Yeah, the times when he most had to be that guy was usually when everything else wasn't working.
All else failed.
So
sure.
When you're in that situation, you're going to fail more often than not, considering the other four guys next to you aren't getting open shots either. So that's sort of a thing that you always remember.
Right.
When he struggled, right? So,
but at the same time, after he
agree.
went 5 for 10 against Northwestern on threes, he became a little bit more liberal with his shooting, and all it wasn't able to be replicated.
What are we setting the over/under at for Xavier Simpson 3-point shooting percentage?
Percentage? 32% is what I'd put it at, over/under. So if I'm making the line, if I'm trying to get a lot of action.
Would you take the over or the under if you had to take a side?
I'm betting my money. I would take the under.
Okay. That is probably the $1 million question for Michigan this year. If that's a 35 on the far right side of KenPom.com, that's different offense. Even if it's just a 35 for if he just makes a bunch of threes in bad games, teams will prepare to play Michigan differently. That's something that you kind of lose in the facts of it, I think. So I don't know. That's the toughest, I think, question for Juwan Howard as far as how you make the whole thing work. It's just what you do with Simpson, and not that he's a problem, but just how to get the most out of him.
Right. And there's always going to be if I feel like when Xavier Simpson is at his best, his scoring is as a totally supplemental to his game. And everything else is him moving the ball, getting into gaps, finding space, finding guys, creating for others, and then he gets that one little look and he goes and he gets a basket. Where on any given possession, where would you rank him in order of option to score the ball?
Yeah, it's not about him scoring. It's about the problem is that if you pass the ball so well, teams are going to make you score. Right? So Simpson will be he's probably the fifth option as far as who you want to take a shot, depending on who's on the court. But the point is that the other four guys will all get better shots if he's getting them the ball. The reason you talk so much about him improving his scoring is that it prevents teams from defending Michigan a certain way that will force him to score, right? I mean,
but do you think there were times last year where he got maybe a little bit ahead of his skis and thought of himself as more of a scorer than he is?
I think those are more driven by how defenses guarded Michigan than him getting ahead of his skis.
Okay.
I think it was a situation where teams were making him do that because they could actually sell out to take everything else away because that was how they were willing to lose. And they saw him throw 12 assists against the team, and they're not going to go down that way. They're not going to let him just get in the paint and find Iggy for an open three or find, you know what I mean? You can't let him do that. And it's all about what a defense gives up. And a defense is going to give up shots to Zavier Simpson before they give up assists. So that's what it comes down to for me. It's not I don't think he was I'm going to put up 20 tonight. I think it was just, if anything, he took those defensive coverages personally. And that might be where he would get ahead of his skis a bit. I do think that he had some moments last year where he didn't handle losing necessarily well. That game in East Lansing, he kind of lost his mind a little bit.
Yeah.
How does that go in a new system with a new regime? That could be interesting early in the year. He's not a guy that really handles losses particularly well, I wouldn't say. No,
and if there are spans of time kind of dictated by frustration, he's the dude who runs hot, man, and he's the first to admit it. And it's what makes him as great of a competitor as he is, and it's a reason that he's a fan favorite and someone that is kind of just a magnetic figure, right? But it can also be his undoing at times. And it'll be, senior year maturity Xavier Simpson is going to be very interesting to see, right? Because, what you can boil over the pot a little bit when you're a sophomore and a junior and stuff like that. But this is going to be a new team that needs some
things that
kind of keep it all intact when it goes sideways. Because every season goes sideways. Even good teams, right, have their times, and it's really easy to go in a first year of a new regime. It's going to be easy for guys to go in their own direction.
There's going to be a game in November or December where everyone loses their mind. The good thing is that it's basketball and not football, so it's not like the entire 12 months of the year are riding on every single week. And it's all about how you weather those storms, and there's always more games, more opportunities. So, on the other hand, he's a senior. The clock's ticking, right? Like, there will be that pressure on him to kind of get to what he wants this team to be early and often, I would say. And I don't know how he'd really... Like, he's always had another run back, right? So, that could be interesting. Any other Michigan thoughts on your hand?
Not really.
From the halls of Phil Martelli's office?
No. No. I mean, they... I'll just be curious to see how they handle the preseason. If we do anything, we will get... Juwan Howard's going to have to sit at a table for an hour next week in Chicago and answer questions. So it'll be kind of interesting to watch him in that setting for the first time. I'm always interested in media things because it's my job. So, to kind of watch him navigate that whole scene will be cool. And week after that, or it's like I think mid-October, it will be media day at Michigan, and then get a little bit more unfiltered access. Like in the past, they've let us sit in on some stuff in connection with that day. Does that happen this year? I don't know. So, if I was a betting man, I'd say that the scrimmage is the first time we really watch Michigan run in full, and hopefully I'm wrong, but we'll see.
Yep. So, secret scrimmages, we can talk about those real quick.
Sure.
You dropped some news on the people. Michigan State, Gonzaga, right? And then Michigan, Detroit?
Yes. Michigan State will play Gonzaga in Denver, and Michigan will host Detroit Mercy at Chrysler.
Why do they play these in random places like that? Do we know?
Michigan State?
Yeah.
They like the idea of replicating
a
road trip. A road trip, yeah.
But not just go all the way to Gonzaga, go to, I guess, their big airports or something?
Well, Gonzaga, I think, wants the same thing out of it.
Okay.
Both teams want to pack the bags, right? Get out of your comfort zone, get off your home court, all that stuff. There's two programs with endless resources. Why not,
Yeah, that's fair.
So last year it was in Minneapolis. This year it's here, or it's in Denver. Next year, if I'm a betting man, they're going to play someone like a Villanova or something like that in a similar scenario. I think these coaches are
playing in a pro. They're usually in the NBA arenas, right?
Well, I don't know. Last year was the first time that I knew of them to do this. So,
which was in the
yes,
right? I believe that's right.
I think it was. Where did the Timberwolves play?
Yeah, I would think that's probably one of the biggest benefits is getting to playing a big arena like that. I can see it. It's just I feel like that's kind of unique for these. Like a lot of is that common for secret scrimmages?
I don't know.
I haven't noticed it.
I don't know why it isn't more. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Probably just Gonzaga is so damn far away, right? Wow. Like it helps. It is like Denver's.
There's airplanes. Who cares what's far away? What are you talking about? They want to go play a neutral court game, and so does Gonzaga. And each gets the benefits. I think it makes a ton of... I don't know why everyone doesn't do it.
The travel for Michigan and Detroit is much more straightforward.
Right. I mean, the funny thing is I think it would be a very smart thing for this Michigan team to have done, to go somewhere and play a road game. The first time you pack your bags and leave campus is going to be for an actual game under this whole, everyone's trying to figure out what this process is going to look like. I think you probably would have wanted a dry run, no?
Yeah, I mean, what's wrong with playing your first road game in the Bahamas? What could go wrong?
We'll see.
I do think that it's probably harder to plan logistically, given the bringing a staff in late and everything. Seems like maybe that could be part of it, right? You're bringing in all new people.
I disagree with that. I don't think it's that hard logistically.
Well, Michigan usually played road games. I mean, they weren't long, but the past secret scrimmages have generally been on the road. So.
Yeah, they played Toledo and blah, 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 and that's
most of those were.
I think it would have been a more logical thing just to get off campus.
That's fair.
So that's that.
Anything else?
I'm trying to think news and notes. I don't have much. No.
So we will be at Big Ten Media Day next week. Juwan Howard, like you said, should be good.
Tom Izzo doing his thing, holding court as usual, and we'll probably record a pod either before that or there.
Yeah, I'm leaving that night, so I don't know. We'll figure out a time.
All right, sounds good. I hear the sirens in the background. That's usually our sign-off audio. We appreciate everyone listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Subscribe to UM Hoops. Subscribe to The Athletic. Do all these things that make this possible. And be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.